Thursday, November 30th, 2023, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Well, today we're going to look at the petrodollar. I've covered the petrodollar extensively for the last 6-7 years, mainly because I thought the petrodollar was going to go away. And I would say it is going away. It is waning. And we're going to look at why it's so important, especially with the death of Henry Kissinger. He passed away yesterday. He's the architect of the petrodollar. And we're going to look into that briefly and why it's so important. And before I do, though, I like to say that if you're new to the channel, or if you've been watching my videos for a while but haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Make sure you share videos that you think others would find interesting, and make sure you hit that little notification bell as well, and the like button. And again, thank you all for the support of this channel and the interest that you have in my channel. We couldn't have a channel if it wasn't for you. And I see it as well as a community. As Graham Hobbs said a few years ago, Graham Hobbs, who's been following the channel for a long time. Thank you, Graham. So, I even have a petrodollar playlist. It's called the Petrodollar Files. And I started noticing that the Chinese and the Russians were developing infrastructure about 6-7 years ago that would eventually challenge the US dollar or the petrodollar in the monetary sphere, in the payment system, in the trading of commodities. One example was the Shanghai Gold Exchange, the Shanghai Commodity Exchange, and the agreements, bilateral agreements between China and Russia for payments. And that has spread, of course, with BRICS, now BRICS Plus. Yes, granted, Argentina looks like it's not going to join BRICS, but that's a different story. So, Henry Kissinger, he's a controversial, or was a controversial individual. I'm not here to judge him or anything. I'm just going to talk about the petrodollar, and that wasn't the only thing he participated in. Of course, FT says American diplomat Henry Kissinger dies aged 100. The former U.S. Secretary of State helped open up relations with China and ushered in a détente with the Soviet Union. So he wasn't just famous for the petrodollar. He was famous for a lot of other things. And it's interesting that with the petrodollar waning, with the bond markets being in trouble, just recently this summer, Henry Kissinger visited China. He went to see Chinese governmental officials. I think he did see Xi Jinping. You kind of wonder if he was asking the Chinese to slow down with the sales of treasuries or something like that, or dollars. And why would he do that? Well, because he knew how important demand for treasuries and dollars is for the United States, especially with the United States being the preeminent power in the world, the unipolar world, right after the fall of the Soviet Union. Without a strong currency, without low rates, you can't run an empire. And that was one of the reasons why they negotiated with the Arabs and OPEC on the petrodollar. So I'm going to reference this article here, which I found recently, which is quite interesting. It's quite short, and it gives you a very good idea why the petrodollar is so important. And it's from a website called greatpowerrelations.com. And I do recommend you watch my petrodollar videos in the petrodollar playlist. I've covered all of this extensively, but I thought it'd be good to just do it here concisely for those of you who haven't heard about the petrodollar and those of you who need a refresher. So, birth of petrodollar 1974-75, birth of petrodollar and petrodollar recycling. Attention soon focused on the oil exporting countries after the U.S. quadrupled its grain export prices shortly after the 1971 gold suspension. And of course, that was the whole reason why the petrodollar had to come about for the U.S., because the dollar was backed by nothing after Nixon closed the gold window. Why did he close the gold window? Well, because America was losing gold to its trading partners, because it was running huge trade deficits and current account deficits. The oil exporting countries quadrupled their oil prices. So they did that in response to the U.S. quadrupling grain prices. So there's always two sides to the coin. A lot of people think, well, they just quadrupled oil prices because they're greedy. No, because they also had to buy grains. Saudi Arabia and the Arab countries are not agricultural powerhouses, are they? It's all sand over there, a lot of desert. U.S. diplomats had let Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries know that they could charge as much as they wanted for their oil, but that the U.S. would treat it as an act of war, not to keep their oil proceeds in U.S. dollar assets. So, yes, we're seeing de-dollarization. We're seeing a lot of the OPEC countries now. We saw UAE. There's a story the other day. They're going to allow countries to settle in other currencies with them other than dollars. That's not new. We saw that China went to Saudi Arabia. Well, the Xi Jinping met the king of Saudi Arabia last December. I'm sure they came to an agreement on their oil dealings to deal in their own currencies. So how come the U.S. hasn't declared war on the OPEC countries? Well, because I think if you do it, in a big group, if you don't do it on your own, you'll be fine. And I think, the world has moved on. The world is a different place. America is losing, I think, a lot of its power and influence, even though it's still the biggest military in the world. The other countries are catching up. So let's continue. The 1973 oil crisis further fixed the value of the dollar as a result of this oil shock, bringing Saudi Arabia and the OPEC countries to make a secret agreement with Washington, the main architect being President Nixon's legendary Secretary of State, Mr. Henry Kissinger. So there you go. This agreement provided that in exchange for Washington's political and military protection, the OPEC countries would be required to sell oil only in dollars. Well, the other thing about military protection is that the Saudis saw how President Biden and the Biden administration just left Afghanistan after 20 years, and it was a botched up retreat. And Saudi Arabia saw, well, they could do that to us. They could leave, and not protect us. So we're going to do an agreement with the Russians. And they did, like a week later. Anyway, let's continue. The petrodollar was thus born, being a replacement for the gold-linked standard that existed prior to Nixon. Well, it wasn't prior to Nixon. It was prior to 1971 because Nixon became president in 1969. But anyway, once the system was supported by OPEC members, the global demand, and here's the important part, the global demand for U.S. petrodollars hit an all-time high. Petrodollars became the basis for American domination over the global financial system, which resulted in other countries being forced to buy dollars in order to get oil on the international market. Well, that's not necessary anymore. A lot of the oil exporting countries are now doing bilateral deals to trade in rupees with India, or in yuan or renminbi with China, in rubles, whatever currency they want. And of course, they're buying gold as well, because currencies need, fiat currencies need some backing. Just like the dollar, when it dropped, the gold link needed some backing, and the backing was oil. But I think gold is coming back, of course, because these people know that ultimately the best monetary asset is gold to back a fiat currency. Ideally, in the ideal world, of course, we'd have just gold as money and no fiat currencies, but unfortunately, we don't have that. This was the largest geopolitical economic change since World War II. Was arguably implemented in 1973 with the agreement OPEC, Saudi Arabia, and the United States to sell oil exclusively in dollars. Saudi Arabia should preferably invest the surplus of oil business in U.S. debt securities and bond market. Well, the other thing as well, with the bull market in bonds being over, in my opinion, U.S. debt securities are not as fit for purpose. And what do I mean by that? Well, they're not really holding their value. Treasuries have kind of collapsed in the last 2 years as yields have gone back up from like below 0.5% in the 10-year all the way to 5. Hopefully a lot of you know how rising yields inversely affect the price of bonds. And I think it's another reason why these countries have learned that the best monetary asset to have is not bonds from fiat money bonds, but gold, because gold holds its value. And so let's continue. By 1975, all OPEC countries were trading oil in US dollars, which later became the standard for the oil-producing nations. Trading oil for US dollar restored the demand for dollar in the foreign exchange market. Petrodollar recycling is the phenomenon where oil exporting nations earn more money than they could possibly invest in their own economy, and the surplus they shall invest in U.S. debt securities. The term petrodollar recycling is coined or was coined by Henry Kissinger. So there you go. I'm going to stop right here. I'm going to put a link to this article in the description. You can read the whole thing. So what that means then, the demand for dollars, if there's demand for a currency, the currency stays strong. And when a currency is strong, it can buy more things. But when there isn't as much demand for a currency, it's just like anything in economics, that currency becomes weaker and buys fewer things. And that's what rising prices are. That's what inflation is. And the currency can become weak if the country in question, the government in question, and the central bank in question create too much currency out of thin air through the mechanism of borrowing and money printing. And that's what happened to the dollar. I know the bond market has recovered of late in the last month, but if you look at M1 right here, money supply in the US, and M2, yes, they have come off a little bit, but they're at still astronomical levels. And that's all you need to know about inflation. And the fact that it's not over. The dollar is going to continue to weaken. And yesterday we had economic data that confirmed that. And this is all to do with trade, U.S. goods trade balance. And look at how the trade deficit in the US is nowhere near coming into balance and hasn't come into balance in more than 50 years. So the trend is for more trade deficit. What is that a reflection of? Well, it's a reflection of the fact that America is consuming more than it produces, and that monetary policy and fiscal policy are still very expensive, and that's why the dollar is heading south. What about all the other fiat currencies that are based on the dollar? Originally through Bretton Woods in 1944, well, they're going to go down in value too. They're all gonna sink, and I've spoken about that as well. And as Voltaire once said, the intrinsic value of paper money or fiat currencies is zero. They usually return to zero. So there you go. Hopefully that helped, the petrodollar and why it came about, and of course the man who was the architect of it, who passed away yesterday at 100 years old. So with that, let's quickly look at where the markets are this morning. It's 8:45 a.m. London time. We got spot gold at 2,042. It's down a couple of dollars. The low's been 2,041. The high's been 47. Just one note about gold. Being the last day of the month today, if we close above 1989, it will be an all-time monthly closing high. Right now it looks like we will safely close above 1989, but you never know with the gold market. And I would say a close above that level would be a breakout on a monthly basis. Just look at this chart. What about silver? Well, silver has a key level, in my opinion, at 25.27. It was the high yesterday, and it was a previous high in the last few years. That's really important to break out right now. Overnight, the high's been 25.14. Right now, we're down about 4 cents, just around 25. Dow futures up 100. NASDAQ is up 18. S&P is up 2. To the currencies, sterling is down 0.2 at 126.68. The euro is down 0.4 at 109.23. And the dollar is down slightly versus the yen at 147.03. Dollar's unchanged versus the yuan at 7.14. The Aussie dollar is unchanged at 66.18. The dollar is up slightly versus the Canadian dollar, 136.03. The Kiwi dollar is up slightly at 61.59. WTI crude is up 0.5%, creeping back towards 80. It's at 78.20. Brent crude is up 0.5% as well at 83.16. So crude oil has rebounded quite a bit here. Platinum is down $5 this morning, trading around 9.30. High-grade copper is unchanged at 3.82. And a quick look at the Treasury market. The 10-year yield, yes, we broke through that 4.33 level, which was important. We're now at 4.28. As I said, though, I think this rally in bond prices is temporary. The long-term picture, in my opinion, is for a bear market in bonds and higher yields. But right now we're at 4.28, unchanged, the 10-year yield. The UK government bond market, or gilts, the 2-year gilt yield is at 4.64, up about 9 basis points. Yes, we've had a relief rally in UK government bonds as well. Again, I think this is all temporary. The 10-year is at 4.18. It's up 7 basis points. And the 30-year is at 4.68. So with that, I'm going to wish you all a very good day. Take care. Bye.